Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Chrysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey Emily, I am so excited to be welcoming you back for a second episode on the Everyday Business Problems Podcast, and excited to get into content creation and your stupid simple content system. Thanks for coming back on the Everyday Business Problems Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a fun conversation last time, so
I know.
Forward to diving back in.
What's that?
I just said I'm looking forward to diving back in.
Oh, yes. I always cut you off right at the beginning part, so I apologize for that. But yeah, to recap, our previous conversation was all around marketing automation and how very often, manufacturers specifically, but, very often in general, we kind of look to the tools of automation before we do the really heavy lifting of strategy development and kind of all the things that come before we take a look at those tools. So I'm excited to talk today about the system that you've developed, the processes behind that. Kind of what was the genesis behind what you've created with your stupid simple content system?
Yeah, it really was. I developed it for us to use, and I was like, well, this is kind of cool. I think my clients would benefit from this, so I just decided to turn it into a kind of a download on the website. So yeah, and it started as a blog system because I'm always telling my clients, the more you add to your website, the better it will rank, and it's good to add. Or a blog is a great way to do that. But it really, if you're coming up with that content, as that you can repurpose those things into different types of content. So, you could take a blog post and dice it up into, 6-7 social media posts, or create a video out of what your blog post is about. So there are hundreds of ways to dice that up. And on the flip side, if you're kind of a terrible writer, but you are a good speaker and you like to have conversations with people, you can start with recording the video first and then get transcripts of the video and turn that into a blog post. So it's kind of, you're always trying to use your content in as many ways as possible, because you never know where you're going to find where your prospects are going to find you. So I was just actually listening to a podcast this morning, Machine Shop Mastery podcast, and with, I need to look up who it was, but M89 Machining in California. And she was talking about, she's this 27-year-old with like pretty nails, and she posts her machining videos on Instagram, and she's gotten a bunch of business just from doing that. And she said she's only posted like 20 different reels on Instagram, and she's gotten a lot of business from that already. So, every channel you're going to find different prospects. So, and that's why I always kind of start out telling my clients too, like, don't try to do all the things at once. Pick one thing and get good at that first, and then add channels, and because you'll find different prospects in all of those areas. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. A lot of really insightful things there, though. I mean, yeah, kind of, firsthand experience, right? Trying to do too many things at once, trying to be in too many places. And kind of on that point, I'd love for you to expand a little bit, because I think this is helpful for people, especially really no matter where they're probably at in the content journey. But this thought process around every platform kind of, I don't want to say it attracts different people, but you do kind of find that you need a bit of a different either delivery mechanism, or kind of the conversation flow is slightly different per platform. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that from your experience, and how, manufacturers, how people trying to figure this stuff out, how they could kind of utilize that to their advantage. Like, where do they like to hang out?
Yeah, definitely. And that would always be the first step. Like, start with the places that you're familiar with. If you spend a lot of time on YouTube, maybe YouTube is a good place for you to start, because you're already familiar with those conversation nuances and how people present information on YouTube, and kind of the the format and the style and the conversational tone and all of those things. Like, you're kind of more familiar with that because you've been there longer. Whereas, some people might be more familiar with blogs because they've been around, for 30 years now, however long people have been blogging. And so, yeah, it's important to kind of pay attention to the way people are interacting in that space, and really get to know, it's just like getting, like, if you're in a new social setting, you're not going to jump in. Most people are not going to jump in right away and start, chatting it up and whatever.
Joe.
They're kind of like observe first. Yeah, maybe you will, but maybe you should observe first. But, kind of get familiar with the territory first before you really, jump in. So it's an etiquette thing. It's just getting familiar with the etiquette in that space first. And again, I always say this, social media is for connection. It's social, right? There's social networking. It's about networking and connecting. So yes, you should be creating, if you want to put content out there, you should be creating content, but even before that, it's really good to just establish those connections first, and follow other people in your industry or in adjacent industries, and kind of see what they're doing, and be super supportive of other creators, because anyone who starts this journey knows how difficult it is. So and there's plenty of room for everyone. Like, you're not, just because someone else has way more followers than you, it's only because they've been doing it longer. It's not, it's not something that you should be paying attention to initially.
Yeah, I think in general, though, it feels intimidating for people, kind of regardless of the industry that you're in, regardless of the size organization. I mean, case in point, I know some really large, and I'm sure you do as well, but I know some really large organizations that are horrible at social media. Their presence, their messaging, their kind of engagement, and like what they're putting out into the social spaces. I mean, it's just terrible. You look at it and you just know it's kind of like taking, your website and, hey, we've been around since 1942. It's like, here's why we're awesome. You're
amazing.
Exactly. Instead of inviting people into the conversation, to your point, and being social and utilizing the channels to start conversations and just see where it goes, educating, entertaining, all of those things. But, I'm sure it's intimidating for people that are trying to figure it out. And again, going back, I love systems, right? To process systems, going back and having a framework to be able to start that process. And, learn as you go from other people that are in your specific industry, in your specific vertical, and people adjacent. I think that was a great comment because, I talk about from a sales and marketing perspective, from time to time when you are in, a S&OP scenario, right? You're planning for next year, you're doing some strategic high level, overall business planning. You definitely should be checking out what both your direct and indirect competitors are doing. There's things to be learned there. There's things how are they marketing? How are they showing up, on their e-com sites, on their kind of traditional content sites. So I think that's really, a wise thing to do for people. Maybe you could talk a little bit more too about from a kind of a general standpoint, like this hub and spoke model or the pillar and micro content model. You talked about it with the blog posts and kind of taking those things and making other things from them. I think sometimes that gets lost on people. You think, oh my gosh, every day I have to create this new thing. And the reality of it is you don't. You can repurpose a lot of stuff.
You will burn yourself out very quickly if you try to, post something new every day and come up with, I mean, some people are better at it than others, I guess, but really it's so much easier. And, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, but like this week, I've just been kind of in a little bit of a slump. Like I haven't been super inspired, I guess. I've had a lot of, just annoying things that I've been like working through in my business.
Life, right? You've had life going on. You've had your business going on.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So that's just, that's how life is. It happens. Like you're not going to be super inspired and inspiring every week, every day. So having that content built out ahead of time really helps in those scenarios, because then you don't have to worry about what, like, I'm not ahead on my content right now, so I have not been posting on LinkedIn because I am too preoccupied and, like I said, just not in a good place to like put myself out there. So so it's really good to build up a base of content and have it ready to go and or even scheduled out. And then you were asking about pillar content. So it's easier to, as a subject matter expert, you have years of knowledge and experience on certain topics. It's hard to distill that down into one social media post that can be impactful, especially like an Instagram post or typically you don't want to have a massive caption on an Instagram post or Twitter, for example. Like, you only have 32 characters in Twitter. So, so starting with the bigger picture of what you're trying to communicate and then breaking it down into the points is always going to be the easier process. And like a mind map is really a good way to do that. Get a big whiteboard or chalkboard or whatever. And okay, this is the topic I want to talk about. And what are some of these different things that we can focus on within that topic? And make notes too, when you're doing that of, this post should be linking to this post when we start talking about this thing, and you deeper dive into that one item in another post, right? So anytime you can link your content internally, or even like on LinkedIn, you can link to past posts. That can be depending on what you're doing. But it's always good to kind of lead your prospect or lead your audience on a journey and give them more, so that when they're interested in more, they have a path to get there. And the more they start interacting with your content and finding value with it, the more likely they're going to be to want to work with you. And
I mean, even to kind of that ending point, even if it's not necessarily moving them closer to working directly with you, you may still glean just a tremendous amount of information through that interaction. You may find a new pain point that you weren't really keyed in on. You may find some, kind of associate product maybe that you've been considering and haven't really committed to developing further, but you may find that there's a real need in the marketplace for those things. So there's a lot of positivity that can come out of trying to get those conversations started and doing that through your content system. And, kind of to your earlier point about being in these situations where sometimes you're not feeling the most creative, having, a process, having a system around you that allows for those downtimes of, kind of, hey, I'm not really feeling the creative juices going, so I need to take a step back and kind of pause. But I've got, all these different ideas that I've already kind of documented and have put into some sort of, hierarchy or kind of grouping. And again, I think that's, one of the challenges as I look, especially in the manufacturing sector. It's, kind of a lot of old school thought process. It for many, many years and still today, a lot of kind of that belly to belly sales interaction. And so just now starting to warm up to this idea of the, the social selling aspect. And the other thing I would say, which would be, great to get your input on is, I've heard from, some of the kind of big names in social media, it's document, don't create, right? And so I think that's a great kind of launching pad specifically in manufacturing, because you don't realize how many cool things you do every single day that other people are interested in. And if you just document, don't create that, it doesn't take much to kind of drive engagement and conversation. So what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, that is a fantastic, I don't know if I've heard that exact phrase before, but that is a great tip. I mean, yeah, you're out there. And I think actually the biggest challenge with that for manufacturers is NDAs. Your customer doesn't want you to show their part on social media or whatever, you're under secrecy.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest challenge with that for manufacturers. But if, you can still kind of get around that. Like if you zero it, if you zoom in on something so much so that you can't tell what it is, or like, zoom out so far that you can't tell what it is, or something, something like that. Or just show it from a different angle that doesn't show the part so much, but kind of shows what you're doing. Like there's some different ways around that, but, and talking in generalities instead of saying, I did this thing for GM, like I did this thing for a big 3 automaker.
Yeah.
Or, making them more vague like that. But, yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. I mean, you're out there on the shop floor making parts for your customers, or solving problems for your customers all the time. So either keep a journal, or you can just put cameras up in certain places, which I know people get weirded out by sometimes. If you, obviously, you gotta talk these things through with your team and make sure they're okay with them, but and make sure they understand the purpose of them and that you're not just trying to spy on your team. But also, empowering your team too to create their own content and document their own journey. And not everyone comes at that naturally, but I think a lot of the younger generations, for sure, we're more used to doing that. It's kind of been part of our life. So, leveraging the different talents that you have within your team already, to kind of document the things that you do for your customers. And
yeah, I mean, I love all of those things. It's interesting. I like that you brought up kind of some of that pushback around, the NDA, the kind of proprietary things that manufacturers do. It's not dissimilar to a conversation I have with some other people, that are maybe helping manufacturers in the e-com space. And, the question of, well, do we put our pricing out there? What pricing do we put out there? And, if we put it out there, then our competitors know exactly what we're charging. And the kind of pushback I like to give with all of that is, and it doesn't apply to everybody, but it's this thought process of, if your competitors, the question is like, well, if you were to sell something against your competitor, do you have a good idea of what their pricing would be? And 9 times out of 10 they come back and are like, well, yeah, we know what they're charging. It's like, okay, so it's not really a secret then, right? And it's that kind of thought process that will help kind of move that forward. And it doesn't always apply. So, that's not like a one size fits all approach, but definitely something to kind of be mindful of when you're thinking about this.
So back to about pricing and kind of showing your
cards, so to speak.
Yeah, showing your cards. I have one client that calls it dropping their pants.
Yeah. There you go.
Showing everybody what's underneath. I get that, and in super competitive commodity type arenas where you're like machine shops, for example, where you're kind of competing on price a lot. I totally get that, but like for me, most marketing agencies don't show their pricing online, and it's kind of a differentiator for me. Like I have all of my packages online. I send them to prospects before I book them for anything. So, and I think that transparency sets me apart. So it's really it's a business owner's decision, I guess, or a leadership decision. And there's pros and cons to both sides. But, I think, I always just think it's more customers prefer it that way. They want to be able to do their research, and if it's really coming down to price only, you might need to look into some other differentiating yourself in other ways. That's the definition of a commodity, right? Is when it's just based on price. And
I was curious, but I mean, it's a great perspective. And again, I think it's worth the conversation, whether we're talking, specifically about price, or we're talking about, kind of documenting the work that you do. There's different ways to approach kind of both of those things. And at the very least, it's worth the conversation, because it's such an easy place to kind of start to share your story and share the things that are happening. And ultimately, those are the things, back to that kind of, your employees are already talking about what happens there. That's the easiest way to attract new business into you, is by those conversations. So I think I'd love to kind of transition to talk a little bit more in depth about, the content system itself, and kind of take at least a brief walkthrough there. We are going to make this available to people, so make sure we put this in the show notes as a freebie for people. And so I'd love to maybe just take a bit of a dive into, the framework itself, and kind of walk through at a high level what that looks like, and how, it was developed to kind of help people that are just starting out, and as well probably help people that have already been doing it for a while, that maybe aren't seeing the necessarily the results that they were hoping for, and or maybe getting a bit discouraged by the content creation game. So I'll kick it over to you to kind of talk through the framework a little bit.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's part process and part like cheerleader, because I have a lot of messaging in here that's about, you're not the only one struggling with this. Like, this is to help really help you crush it. So I think I kind of start by, I present it as like this framework will help you channel your creative energy to where it will be most impactful, instead of wasting it on details. So, and that's back to kind of what we talked about before. Like that creative energy is limited. So trying to optimize that at all times is really important. So step one is know your why, know your reasons and plan accordingly. I'm sure you've probably all heard of Simon Sinek, start with why. That's, you really need to have that for yourself more than anything. Like you want to have that identified so that you can keep that in mind as you're doing this, because it's not, as we've talked about, it's not easy. It can be discouraging sometimes when you're not doing it. And if it's just for growing your business, I would encourage you to go deeper than that. What does that look like, and what do you hope to get out of this? And at the very least, what do you hope to get out of this? Because I think a lot of people miss the opportunity for professional growth that comes out of it too. Like just the act of going through all of this, you gain a lot of skills and improved mindset just for as a person in general, in my opinion. So coming up with your why, you're probably creating for a couple specific reasons: driving traffic to your website, increasing sales, whatever. So, and then depending on the reasons that you're really doing it, you want to make sure that you increase certain, or you want to make sure that your content gets to certain things. So if you're trying to increase your web traffic, you need to make sure that you're optimizing for specific keywords, and then giving your traffic somewhere to go from there. That journey that we talked about, like trying to give them more. If you're doing it for lead generation, make sure you have a good, powerful call to action. So kind of those things, but then it's more than just business objectives. So like I said, you want to have that powerful reason for yourself. It's a long game, and it requires sustained effort for over a long period of time. So you want to just make sure that you really have those personal reasons and you come back to them, come back to that reason and remind yourself why you're doing this, because sometimes you will need that. Step 2,
hold on.
Brainstorm like a boss.
I want to interject something real quick and kind of dive into that step 1 before we get into step 2, because one of the things that I really love about what you put together is that, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about in terms of tapping into other people on your team. So this is, a system and a framework that you can apply kind of as a business owner, as an operations leader, but then also share this with the team, and then kind of do a joint one where you've got, the business objectives laid out, but you're kind of putting all of this together from, at least that why standpoint, because everybody's going to have a bit of a different why from an individual basis, but then how does that come together as the team to ultimately impact the organization? I think I'd love if you have any examples of that, but I think that was like, I just wanted to interject that a little bit so people kind of grasp how they can maybe apply this within their organization.
Yeah. And doing that work with your team, that's great team building stuff. It's essentially a team building exercise, which is really good for, the way that the talent, the job market is changing, and the way that millennials and Gen Z, we've kind of brought our own needs to the job market. Like we expect different things out of our job, and one of those is deeper meaning and connection. Which, if you're in the older generation, you can roll your eyes at it all you want, but that's the reality of where we come from, right?
You're stuck with it.
We just want to have this deeper connection with our work.
Yeah.
You're stuck with it. Sorry. This is who we are. doing this exercise with your team of brainstorming and identifying your reasons for wanting to do this, and establishing that base of ideas and content, that's really good brainstorming stuff. So and the personal reasons are obviously going to be very different from the business owner's perspective versus, a machinist's perspective.
Yeah.
But I think for everyone, it's an opportunity to, build your personal brand, which is a big deal regardless of what you want to do with your life. I think that's valuable for everyone in this day and age. I mean, you need to have that. If you want to be successful and make something of yourself, then you kind of need to have.
I think it's a bit of the new resume. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to get too far off topic, but I feel like that personal branding is really kind of the newest version of your resume. You tap into so many of your skills, and you can showcase it in such a more kind of positive and dynamic light versus, a traditional type of resume.
Bullet points.
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't fit a personal brand in an ATS system and, get disqualified because you didn't check all of the boxes. So, so I'll let you finish running through the system. I don't want to get too far into the weeds there, but.
Yeah. So step 2, brainstorm like a boss and build your vault. And this is back to what I was saying. This is the really fun part. This is the part where you get to get kind of silly with your team. And it's actually a great icebreaker too. Like, come up with the most off the wall idea you can think of, just to show your team that any idea is welcome here. Like, we want to get creative and think outside the box, because content is, there's a lot of competition out there for eyeballs and attention. And, the more unique and fun you can have with it, the more your audience is going to pick up on that and want to be part of it. So, again, building out your vault of ideas is a big part. And I kind of have I provide just a spreadsheet. It's a Google sheet that I use. So, and then there's a list of questions to kind of get you thinking. A lot of these questions are what I ask in our setup process. A lot of like, who is your customer? What's their, what personality and traits and values do you appreciate in customers? What kind of keywords do they use when they're looking for your solution? What other solutions are out there? What real world problems are they facing that are maybe adjacent to what you're doing? All of these kinds of questions. And then I also offer a few tools that you can use to help streamline that. And then step 3, turn your ideas into awesome content. So this is the hard part, but it doesn't have to be that hard. So, and again, this is like part coaching here. It's like, acknowledge that you're not going to be good at this at first, and that is okay.
It's actually better that you start and you're terrible, and that nobody watches, because it gives you a great runway to get way better. By the time people start to find you, you're actually pretty good at doing this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's watching like my first podcast that I was on, Mavens of Manufacturing. That was my first like industry podcast I was ever on. And I've watched it since then, and I'm like, oh, don't watch it. Please don't watch it.
I just like to keep those as a
watch
reminder.
Maven. Just don't watch my episode.
I just like to keep those as a reminder of where I've come from.
Yeah, how far you've come.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So, get as much practice as you can, set actionable, achievable goals for yourself. And by that, I mean, instead of for me, this works better. But instead of telling yourself like, I need to make, 2 blog posts a month, instead of that being your goal, make it, I need to write, or my goal is to write for, 30 minutes a day, or like an hour every other day or something, whatever you want that to be, but make it a time thing, not an item thing, because that it's going to take you a lot longer than you think it is at first.
Yeah.
So, and that's discouraging. If you set this goal of 2 blog posts a month and you aren't able to get to that, like I have a client that I'm working with right now that's like, I feel like I'm letting you down because I'm not doing a post every week. I'm like, you're not letting me down. Yeah. That's you. And just, feeling like you should be doing more, that is discouraging. So that's making it even harder for you to be successful. So instead just set a goal to, write for so many minutes a day, or, so many hours a week, or however you want to make that, but don't make it so much about the end thing, spend an hour advice. Brainstorming every week, or at the end of the week, spend an hour with your team going through, okay, what did we learn this week, and how can we create content around that, or something like that.
That's great advice. I mean, from kind of another creator perspective, that's amazing advice, because you put a lot of pressure on yourself when you start putting those kind of deadlines in place. And then to your point, you just don't, especially early on, you don't recognize how much time and energy and kind of what you have to pour into that. I mean, for some people, I think it definitely comes more natural than others. But I would say by and large, 9 out of 10 people, probably 98 out of 100 people, it's a lot of work. It's a process to get better at. It's something you have to practice, and you have to build, this is a great framework to build your own kind of branches and your own, specific steps within the process, because you will find that you maybe ideate better in the mornings, or, in the afternoons, or you have to work through that from kind of that individual creator standpoint. But I really love just from a general perspective, the idea of changing what your goal looks like, from, kind of number of pieces to, I need to do consistent writing, or consistent, creative something, to be able to get to the point where then I can take it and do something. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It still happens to me. Like this week, I was trying to come up with a post, like kind of to tee up this conversation, on, was it Monday? No, it was yesterday. And I tried to create a GIF, whatever you call that. So I was on Giphy trying to create a GIF, and I haven't been in there. Like, I think this must be the first time I've ever used Giphy, which is, I find ridiculous, but and I just had so much trouble getting it to do what I wanted it to do. Like, technology is great when it works, and but it wasn't doing what I was trying to do. And I was on a time, I only had a few minutes, and I had to get on the road, and it was snowing, and I should have given myself extra time.
And then life.
Was bad, and so I'm just in a rush, and life, and it's just, So it still happens, even now, even though I have years of experience creating content for other people and for myself. It's just things still happen where this should have taken me 20 minutes, and it's literally taking 2 hours to make this stupid post. So don't put pressure on yourself that way. Just just give yourself the time and move on.
Yeah.
So then I kind of give you some steps for writing and how it can make it go easier. And the first step is take a deep breath and remind yourself why you're awesome and why your words matter. That's such a huge part of this, because so many people go into this I don't have anything important to say. Like, what do people want to hear from me? Like, you know, it's so easy for our subconscious to do that. Like, we're always our own worst critic. So,
oh yeah. Or the thought
having those
process of
affirmations,
yeah. Or that thought process
just reminding yourself.
Yeah. We keep talking over each other. So, but all I was going to add to what you were saying is, you know, there's that feeling that, well, there's hundreds of people or thousands of people that have already said exactly what I want to say. How am I going to be any different? And nobody has your exact voice, your exact words, your exact mannerisms. So, but to your point, you have to,
or experiences.
Yeah. And you have to have some kind of, you know, like self-motivation behind that to say, like, you know, because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that stuff works. I know it sounds like super cliche and funny, but it works. So, and yeah, and to that question, I mean, that's something that I get all the time too. People like, there's so many other people out there saying the same thing. Like, why is what I'm saying any different? And it's about that presentation. It's how you're presenting it and using your personal stories to drive the point home. You know, it's other people have not had the same experience as you. They don't have the same exact stories. The details are different. So, and people connect with story. So using those stories is a really, that's how you differentiate yourself. Yeah. That's my step 3 here. Think of stories, metaphors, examples that bring them to life. Don't be afraid to get personal. The more personal and relatable, the better. Manufacturing content is notorious for being very boring and sterile, and that's just not what your audience is going to connect with. That's not what's going to make them go, wow, I really love this company and everything that they're about. You know, I want to do more work with them. They're not gonna be that over the moon about you just because you have such and such capability in your shop.
Yeah.
They're gonna be that over the moon when they connect with you on a personal level and feel like, oh yeah, this is my people. So yeah, some different steps for kind of writing longer form content. And then I give some resources for search engine optimization for blogging, and also I'm a huge fan of Otter.ai. There's other systems out there that do it, but you know, you record yourself talking or record a conversation, and then you can take that transcript and copy it into a Google Doc or Word document and turn it into a blog post. You can keep it extra simple and hire somebody to edit your articles. So you really just get all your thoughts down and then have a writer turn that into a cohesive piece, you know. So, and then I have a few other kind of tools that I use. I always have a thesaurus handy, you know, and I'm always probably too much so going through my content and like, okay, I'm using this word too many times. Like, what's a different word that I can use?
Yeah.
Or this is too common of a word or too simple or whatever. And like going through and making it more interesting. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then step 4, the most important one, see how far you can stretch it. That's where the real magic is. It's, different ways to multiply your content. So writing the same exact article from a different perspective or a different angle, using a different set of stories to illustrate your same points, coming up with different words to describe the same things. And then, taking one topic and creating different types of articles around that topic or different types of content. You know, you can do an educational piece, do an entertaining piece, taking a stand on something, or like, how do you do something differently than everyone else does and why? Or some epic story of like how it, whatever you're talking about, helped your customer out of a pinch or something, you know, just coming up with all these different ways to present your topic or your story. So, and then turning it into different types of content, shooting a video, deeper dive on your topic, and creating like this. My blog system, for example, is, I kind of started it as a blog post and then turned it into this like freebie download thing, because there was just a lot more there that I could expand on. So
I mean,
and then share it with everyone.
Well, you got to get it out there.
Got to get it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you put together. It is super comprehensive, and again, I think it's a great, regardless of if you're just getting started and maybe you're feeling some frustration of, not that immediate success of, tons of engagement and sharing and comments and all of those types of things. And it's again, back to, our first conversation around that marketing automation piece, but you've got to put in the work. This stuff takes time, and building a brand, you think about what it's taken you to grow your business to wherever it is at today. And that didn't happen overnight. And this is no different. This is no different than what it took from that traditional sales approach, that, belly to belly, the in-person, however you want to phrase it. This is no different. It's just, on a different platform through a different medium, but it's still connecting, having conversations with people, seeing how you can help solve their problems through the education that you put out, through your products and services. And being open to the fact that, again, this stuff takes time. It takes time for you to get good at it. It takes time for people on your team, even experienced people. You mentioned, which I think is a great point, because too often I think we look at, experts or we're going to outsource, we're going to hire, maybe a content marketing specialist. We all struggle with those types of things. Sometimes you're not going to be real creative. Sometimes you're not going to be able to, necessarily execute the process for one reason or another. So we need to make an adjustment to it. All of those things are a part of this, kind of journey. So, Emily, I mean, I love talking to you about this stuff. We could probably talk about this for like another hour, but we should probably wrap here and maybe, save anything else for a future conversation. So I want to thank you for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast, and looking forward to a future episode with you.
Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Chrysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Chrysler.